Well, welcome everyone. We're at noon, so I think Joanne just came on. I want to say hi. I'm trying to see if there's anybody else I missed who came on that I didn't say hi to. Paul, hello. All right, afternoon. Nobody, you don't get your personal hellos because then we just get started. So it's great to have all of you here. Welcome. This is the week 3 of 3 that we're talking about returning or preparing for the high holidays. And oh, it's just more people coming in. Just want to say hi to everybody. Hello, everybody. Welcome. If you have any technical issues, Silver Lace is here to help you. Feel free to just ping her or Rebecca. Either one of them can help you out. I want to welcome Rabbi Laura Rumpf is here. She's going to be in and out, but she's going to be the new director of Project Kavod when after I retire beginning of October. And so it's really nice to have her here and welcome her into the JFS community. As in the past, I'm going to suggest that if you want to make a comment, I really encourage you to do that. I love getting your comments, but put them in the chat. If they're short, I can respond to them. If they're really long, I can't keep up with them. But I love responding to your comments. So please do comment along the way. We're going to keep everybody on mute. So if you accidentally get off mute, probably Rebecca will mute you. Nothing personal. It's just a way to keep the background noise out. And the other thing about the chat, which I've mentioned before, and I'll just say one more time this week in case you're new, we're just trying to make sure there's no political comments in the chat box. It's people have very different political views. We hope everyone is welcome, and this is kind of hopefully a place where we don't have to get into the weeds of politics, but really talk on a higher level, places where we can all be in the same page. We're talking about returning because the word teshuva, which usually is translated to mean repentance, which is what we look at during this period of the year in preparation for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Rosh Hashanah is only 2 weeks away. The word teshuva means return, literally, and we've been looking at what does it mean to return to our true selves, and in a time when I originally planned this, we thought we'd be returning to perhaps in person for high holiday services, in person to work again, and right now it's unclear who will be able to do that, if any of us will be able to do that. I also want to acknowledge that some people have been at work through all this. Some people have been working in person. People have had very different experiences during this last year and a half. So hopefully this will speak to everybody. So this week we're going to move to week 3. It's going to become more specifically about the high holidays, and we're going to talk about the shofar. The shofar is the horn we blow on Rosh Hashanah 100 times, and at the end of the day on Yom Kippur. And the question is, what are we supposed to hear? What's the call? And how can the shofar help us return to our true selves, our honest selves? And if we could be in that place where our true selves live, and then maybe we could be more fully present and at ease internally with whatever the world brings, whatever it is, that's the return we're talking about today. So I'm gonna put out here's the link if you want to watch this on the link. If you don't want to watch it on the link, we've got it screen shared. Thank you very much, Silver Lace, for doing that. And I'm going to minimize the screen share so I can see as many faces as possible. And we're going to jump right in. Again, please feel free to put things in the chat, and I would love to respond to your comments along the way. All right, part 1. What are we listening for when we hear that shofar blast, and how will that help us return? So Part one is we are listening. When we hear that, we're trying to hear what's truly true within ourselves. That's what the shofar blast is. By the way, there's no one answer to what we're listening to for the shofar, and I'm going to show you that. And this, it might change over the course. If those of you who go to do hear the shofar, it may change over the course of the time of the day as you're hearing the shofar. It changes over the years. It changes over the minute. There is no one answer. I'm offering different answers here. So one is that we listen to the call from within ourselves. And for that, I bring Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. He says, there comes a moment when we summon the courage to be honest with ourselves. By the way, I've read this before and I've taught this before, but there's something about reading this now at the end of a year and a half of COVID and all that came with it, that just feels different, and more to come that we don't even know what's coming ahead. So this just feels different to me now. So he wrote, there comes a moment when we summon the courage to be honest with ourselves. And if we really are honest with ourselves, then we know in our heart that we're not perfect. We don't always get it right, not as individuals and not as a people. And I would say as not as an organization, not as anything. Nobody gets it right all the time. That's the moment when all we can do is cry out. And that's what the shofar is. It's the sound of our tears. Shivarim, that's the three, toot, 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 that's three sighs. Truah, which is 9 little quick sounds, is a series of sobs. And surrounding them, the tekiah, which is the one blast, the call without words, the sound of a heart breaking, our own hearts. No more excuses, no more rationalizations and justifications. Ribono shel olam, Master of the universe, we're saying, forgive us. Truth is, these are the most important moments in life. We can carry on for years deceiving ourselves, blaming others for what goes wrong. We are our own infallible counsel for the defense. But there has to be a time when we allow ourselves simply to weep for the things we know we could have handled better. And that is what the shofar is, the cry that starts when words end. It's the time when we can say, I am vulnerable, and just admit it, because we're all vulnerable deep down inside, right? And this is a moment when we can say, I can touch that part of myself and allow it to just be. And then this next paragraph, I'm always afraid to use the word God because people have different understandings of what that word means. So depending if that's a word that's comforting to you or not, if it's not, think of it as something that's bigger than yourself. The mystery we all experience, it's bigger than us. He writes, and so just think of that when we say the word God. That's when God reaches out to us as parent to child, assuming a healthy parent-child relationship, and holds us close while we weep together. And then God comforts us, or maybe it's the community, or maybe it's letting something else in and gives us the strength to begin again. There's nothing closer to God than a broken heart, and nothing stronger than a heart that's been healed by God's forgiveness. It's really a way of touching the divine within ourselves, which we all have something really deeply ours that we can touch. And this brings really the next text, which is a little bit complicated, so stick with me. This is Rav Kook, who was the first chief rabbi Ashkenazic rabbi in what was in Palestine. He died in 1935, originally from Russia. He talks about this essential I, this thing that's deep within us. And this is not necessarily a text for Rosh Hashanah, but it's something that moved me very much. So, because I think this is what Jonathan Sachs is talking about, Rabbi Sachs. He quotes Ezekiel, who starts off the book of Ezekiel as a prophet. He said, I am in the midst of the exile. And then Ezekiel goes on to tell his story. But Rav Kook takes this and says, what's the I? Who's in the exile? And he says, the inner essential I, that deep thing that we were talking about before, whether of the individual or of the community. It appears within an entity only in relation to its holiness and purity, the purity and holiness within us that we can actually touch, and in relation to the degree of its supernal divine power, suffused by the pure light of an elevated illumination flaming within it. This is very poetic, but basically there's something beautifully alive. There's a flame deep in us that we all have. And the problem is that we don't access it. And so he gives us a quote from Psalms, which is something we say in our high holiday liturgy: we and our forefathers sinned. And he's like, well, how far back do those forefathers go? Well, Adam sinned, the very first human sinned. Adam was alienated from his own essence. How do we know that? Because he turned to the consciousness of the serpent who said, about eating the apple. He let the serpent be his essence instead of letting himself lead himself. And he lost himself. And he didn't know when God said to him, Ayeka, where are you? He couldn't give a clear answer. He said, well, I was hiding, because he gives a whole convoluted answer. Why couldn't he say this? The question was not, where are you physically? The question is, where are you? Where's the you? But he was lost. He had lost his true I, his real self. And then he goes on, this is something as an educator, I think I have to come back to again and again. He says, learned educators come and focus on the superficial, on facts, on things outside the human heart. And the educators, they too remove their consciousness from the I. We're all doing it. We're all doing this. They add straw to the fire. They give vinegar to the thirsty. They fatten minds and hearts with everything that's external to them. We talk about stuff, we don't talk about the real stuff. And the I grows progressively forgotten. And when there's no I, there can be no he or she, and there can be no you. And there's I is first person, he, she, third person. So no other outside of ourselves, and certainly no you, some direct I thou, as Burbu says, a relationship that's really intimate. And by the way, I think Cook is also referring to, for him, it's also God. We talk about God as both third person and second person. And I think he's like, if you don't have the I, you can't have the relationship with others. And then he says, the Messiah, or I would say in this case, redemption. And Messiah is a philosophical idea here. It's not about a person. It's about this time, a time when everything is in peace, when we're in peace with ourselves, with each other, and safety physically and emotionally. And he quotes Lamentations, which says, the breath of our nostrils is the anointed one of God. An anointed one is Mashiach, is Messiah in Hebrew. Meaning that the Messiah's might, the beauty of Messiah's greatness, is that the Messiah is not outside of us. Messiah is in the breath of our nostrils. It's in our own breath. And as he says, let us seek our God and our King David, who is representative of the Messiah. Let us tremble before God and God's goodness. Let us seek our I. Let us seek ourselves and find. Remove all the foreign gods from our hearts. And then he quotes Numbers, you will know that Ani, I, the I inside of us, that's where God dwells. Ani Hashem, I, the God is in us, each one of us. Doesn't mean we're God. And I think that's a really important thing to say. We're not God, but there is divine energy within us, and that's what we're seeking. This is a kind of a convoluted text, but many of you have been with me for many years, so I figured, okay, I'm going to just bring it to you and share it with you, because I think Rav Kook was a great mystic and a very thoughtful teacher. And so these first two are saying the shofar is to find that I, which I know for many of us is, during this last year and a half has felt more, some of us have found it, some of us have lost it more. We've been We've been discovering things about ourselves, about our society, about our about everything that we didn't know, we hadn't seen, we should have seen, we didn't see, and we're lost, many of us. So this is a chance to hear, like, well, where am I? Where am I right now? And can I be comfortable with that? All right. No comments that I'm seeing here yet, so I'm not sure how this is landing for people. But I welcome your comments. Feel free to put something in the chat box if you want to respond to that. That the first idea is that when we hear the shofar, we return to our true I, our essential I, our essential self. I'm actually really curious for those who are, I've always wondered about, like, what's the connection between this and how therapists think about their work. And is it the same? Is it different? What's the same? What's different? I don't know. I mean, I think there's a lot of overlap. Obviously, many of these texts predated modern ideas of psychology. So, but were they an early form of psychology? I don't know. So anyway, anybody who's an expert in this, I would welcome your thoughts either now or another time. All right, so the hearing the I is only the first step, because once I'm in touch with my essential I, then I have the ability to hear more clearly the other. And that is another answer of what are we listening for when we hear the shofar? And that is, we're listening for the call outside of ourselves. The rabbis, the tradition says that the call of the shofar is actually Sarah crying when she finds out that Isaac was almost sacrificed by Abraham. And that was the cry, that was her cry. Another text says, no, it's the cry of Sisera, Sisera's mother. Sisera was one of the ancient enemies of the Israelites. He was killed by Yael. It was during the period of Deborah the judge. You can read about it in chapters 4 and 5 of Judges. But there's this very poignant line where we see Sisera's mother crying, waiting at the window, waiting for her son to return home. And, he needed to be, from our perspective, he needed to be killed, and because he was going to kill all of us. But there was the mother. He had a mother. He wasn't just the enemy. He also had a mother. And so this text number 3 from Rabbi Sharon Cohen Anisfeld. Incline your heart, your ear, to the hollow bent ram's horn, through which human breath becomes a summons and a blast. And what you will hear is the sound of Sisera's mother weeping for her child, our enemy. We'll hear our enemies crying for their children. The sound of a mother weeping. We can conjure 1,000 reasons not to hear this woman's cries. We do it every day. And not only with people we consider our enemies. Some days we don't even bother coming up with reasons. But the shofar blast calls us up short. This is the cry of every mother whose child isn't spared, for whom no angel calls out, for whom no ram appears. Of course, she's referring to Isaac, who was spared. Sarah's cry was because her son was almost killed, and the idea of that was just overwhelming. And according to the interpretation, she died from the shock of just the possibility of what could have happened in this case. But a ram did appear. Her son was saved. The angel called out. For Sisera, for this mother, there was no call. So there seems, for me right now, there's so many people crying out, so many cries to hear, that it's too much to take it all in. But, I'm looking here at the faces I can see and the names I see here, and I say, I'm not the only one listening. We are part of a community. So I need to do as much as I can and trust that you're going to do as much as you can. And we're all going to do as much as we can. But we can't do it if the I isn't solidly there. So this is why we live in community. it'll be a while till we're all, those of us who go to synagogue will, we're communally hear the shofar. But one of the things I noticed in previous years, the room is full. The shofar is the sound of the shofar is having, and I know every person in the room is having a different experience, and that's the way it's supposed to be. But we do it together. We have this different experience together, and together the weight is lifted a bit in terms of what needs to get done. All right, I'm just going to look. I see some notes came in. Great, Kathy. The shofar blast concentrates our exhalation and may help us breathe on the embers of waning fire of life. Yes, that's beautiful, Kathy. What if we breathed in every time we heard this sound, and breathe out? And use it as a breathing exercise and to feel what's deep inside of us. Thank you. Rabbi Laura, I appreciate the framing of the I as that which calls us to something outside ourselves, as opposed to a more self-centered, lonely I that struggles to listen. Yeah, it's so it's like, it's what's both in and out at the same time. It's that which is in us, but it comes from without. And that, in Jewish mystical tradition, there's the soul, there's a set part of our soul, the neshama part. It's always pure. Nothing can mess with it. There's the nefesh, that's another word for soul, and that can get messy, but then the neshama part, it's always there. It's just we don't always have access. We don't always notice it. We can't always access it without really taking the time, as Kathy says, to like breathe on the embers, on that fire. It's there. And Jim, okay, this resonates so much. So much of this stuff was stripped away this past year. Hearing my eye through the simple act of walking in my neighborhood and looking at the face of my neighbors daily and greeting them was a return to an essential connection with myself and others. All this in the midst of the crying I did for the suffering in our world. Yes, I mean, it's not one or the other. And I think one follows the other naturally. And I'm arguing here that the essential I is what comes first. And I want to be careful and say, I don't know if that's always the case. Sometimes it's the other that comes first. It depends on who you are, where you are at. Jim, as you're saying, it was looking at the face of the neighbor that brings the essential I back, but it takes an other. So something to think about. And this this idea of some kind of communal experience, I want to, Solomon, and then I'll come to this. Solomon writes, for most mothers or parents, there is no lamb, right? I'm curious about and I think that's Rabbi Cohen Anisfield's point, is that there's so many people for whom there is no lamb to save their child, right? I'm curious about the ways in which I might be deaf to their cries or flooded and unable to process. Well, how do we find those blind spots, you ask? I mean, that's the question. That's what the shofar maybe is calling us for. That's why I think we have these rituals. It's like my own personal bias is these rituals that we have in any tradition. And I don't think Judaism is any better than any other tradition, but we do have, I'm teaching from this perspective. The rituals are there to open us up, to remind us that there's something bigger than ourselves. It's not so that we can just check the box and say, oh, I did this, I did this, I did this. When we were kids, it was like, did you fast on Yom Kippur? Okay, how much time did you fast? And we would all be looking at our watch. Oh, I got to this many hours. I got to that many hours. Oh, I did it all day. It wasn't about that, but we didn't know that yet. Right? It's not about did you fast. It's about what did you do with that fast? Did it open your heart, right? And so that's what all of this is about, and training ourselves to just be better. I mean, we all have blind spots. That's the I. Like I have on I. It's like, let's admit it. I have a blind spot. I have lots of blind spots. I have tons of blind spots. Once I accept that, then there's a much better chance that I will actually see the things that I'm blind to. First, I have to know that I'm blind to these things. Margaret, I do believe we depend often on the call to us, the loving search for us by the other, sometimes a shocking call, a severe mercy. Yeah, thank you. it's really hard to, Margaret, this is perfect for the next text. We didn't set this up, but this is perfect for the next text, okay? And this next text, and you'll see why. And this was written by Rabbi Chai Levy. She's in Berkeley. She wrote this on July 2nd, when we were thinking that before Delta became so real and so much a part of our lives, to the point that we are not going to be able to go back in the ways we thought we were. So just know that that was the, and to service, to synagogue for the holidays. So that's the context in which she wrote this, but I think the message is still important. And she says, beyond safety protocol questions, there are also the spiritual and emotional questions. How do we celebrate reopening whenever the time comes, while also making space for the pain and losses of this past year? How do we return to the previous formats, knowing how much this past year has changed us? Does Jewish tradition guide us in coming back together with all of the mixed emotions we bring to this next phase of the pandemic? And we thought the next phase was slowly reopening. But anyway, now she's going to offer us an ancient ritual. And I remember when I was visiting the archaeological excavations around the Temple Mount in Jerusalem a few years ago. And on the southern wall, you can see like the stairs going up where people used to go in. And then there's 3 doors. They're blocked off. Now you can't go in, but there were 3 archways. And then on the right and on the left, there were 2 archways. And like, why were there 3 here and 2 there? And I learned this then, like physically at the space, and it was interesting to read this, and I'll see, you'll explain what it is. Usually you go in on the right and you come out on the left. That was the usual. However, and I'm now at this text, the second one on Listen for the Call from Outside Ourselves, Rabbi Chai Levy. Indeed, the ancient rabbis offered the structure of ritual to support people coming back together. The Mishnah, which is the first book of Jewish law, really, the first book that comes after the Bible. So it's written down in the year 200, it's very old, okay? Describes a choreography for pilgrims going to the temple for festivals. Passover, Sukkot, and Shavuot, the 3 pilgrimage festivals, people would go to the temple. All would enter this temple and circle in from the right, but these would go in from the left. A mourner, an excommunicated person, and someone who has an ill person in their house, and someone who's lost something. So those people would go in the outdoor. And the rabbis understood that those who experienced suffering or loss, those who had been shunned, caregivers to the sick, all needed some emotional support. And those going from on the right side would say, why are you going in on the left? And those going on the left would answer, because I'm a mourner, or because I have a loved one who is ill. And those who are going in on the right side would say, may the one who dwells in this house, in the temple, comfort you. Or may the one who dwells in this house have compassion on your loved one. It was an acknowledgement that something was different for them. And it was and everybody, I would imagine, I like to imagine this at least, everyone sometimes went in on the left. Everyone. And everyone sometimes went in on the right. But to admit that I have to go in on the left is a big thing. And to allow people to comfort me is a big thing. But it was just built into the system. And it forces us to acknowledge that we've had an experience that's different than others, or to acknowledge, like, you know what, maybe I just need some support right now. It's a way of it was built into this whole system. And by the way, the steps, another little piece of information, if you're ever there, you can see this. The steps were like one long step and then one short step, one long step. So you couldn't run up the stairs. It was like an ancient speed bump, right? If you see, I mean, if you think about it, if stairs are all the same width, you can run up them. But if they're different widths, you have to kind of pay more attention. You have to go slower. And it was a way to like make it more intentional as you're going up into the ancient temple, so that you would actually see the face of other people going the other way. You would actually take the time, maybe to access the inner eye, you know, on the way up. Carolyn writes, I've heard a couple of podcasts by this author who I think provides insights on how to be with those experiencing grief. She lost a child. Thank you for sharing that, Carolyn. I'm going to save that and we'll listen to it later. So if you want to, the way to save these things, by the way, you just open it now. It'll be on your it'll be on your computer. You don't have to look at it now, but it'll be on your computer. Then come back to the Zoom room if you want to save these things that go in the chat box. I want to bring Rabbi Laura into this conversation, if it's okay with you, Rabbi Laura. She's going to be taking over in October. Any thoughts on these texts?
Oh, what I'm really feeling right now is just the sharedness of our aloneness, if that makes any sense. That there have just been these particular profound collective experiences that we can call grief, we can call change, we can call transformation, and that we're just in a moment where we have to be creative about how we witness each other in that. And I love the choreography you're describing there, that whether it's literally walking past each other or still just finding new ways to encounter each other differently so that we can notice there's something different for you, there's something new for you, and what is that about? And start to tell our stories of what this time has been like, that witnessing each other is so important. So yeah, I'm just thinking about the way we ritualize that, and appreciating Rabbi Chai Levy's creativity and thinking about one way of circling each other, but maybe we need a few other ways of being creative like that.
You know, when you and I spoke earlier this week about this briefly, one of the things you said that really struck me was that these are very embodied practices. Hearing the shofar, as opposed to, like, remember last week, those of you who were here, we had Shimon Bar Yochai in the sand up to his head studying Torah, very unembodied, right? And then at the end of the story, you have the old man who's carrying this smelling, the beautiful smelling myrtles, right? This has to be embodied. This whole experience of return, the sound of the shofar, the going in the outdoor. When we do it, when we say Kaddish, you stand up, you do a ritualized words. You acknowledge, the community acknowledges that you are, you're in a different place, and you don't have to go through the whole story to just say, this is where I'm at. Yeah. Did you want to say more on that?
No, I just really appreciate that there's something really different about telling your story over and over again, which can get very tiring and, involves a self-consciousness of having to, calculate how another person may or may not receive it. And just the way the body is so honest about what it needs, and the body in motion or the body in stillness. And yeah, thinking about how we embody what we're going through, and also embody that listening stance that's open to what we still don't know.
Yes, right. Well, we're going to get to that in a minute, right? Because there's so much we don't know, and we won't know. And this is just a moment in time, right? That's where we're sitting. We're sitting in a moment in time, and how do we live with that moment in time? That's the question. And how do we move forward in that moment in time and recognize that other people also are living in this moment in time, maybe in a very different way? and support each other. Not be, no, I always was like, how do we support the people who are going through our time? I was like, no, wait a second. How do I allow people to support me too? How do they both happen? Because I think I'm capable of both. I'm capable of being supported and I'm capable of supporting others. I don't have to pick which category I'm in. And I think that's, and since I'm mentioning that, I'm going to ask Rebecca to drop in the chat box. The JFS is here for you, since sort of wedge this in. You know, all of us need help sometimes. All of us, every one of us. You know, and I'm certainly on that list. And if and sometimes it's more than our friends can help us with. Sometimes we do need some professional help. And by the way, I tell all the professionals who work at JFS that they should make sure that they are getting the support they need, right? Because it's a circle. We just take care of circle and circle around. So Rebecca, I don't know if you can access the JFS is here for you. She'll drop it in there, and I'll when I send my follow-up email, I'll also have that available. Can I just go to the comments? Lainey, why are the excommunicated participating? That's it. I was actually wondering the same thing. I'm guessing what happened is they had been excommunicated and now they were returning. And, you know, there was some period of excommunication for whatever. And I actually had the same question. I don't know, like what kind of a short period of excommunication people maybe had to go through for whatever reason. That's what I'm guessing. And what's really interesting is that we let people back in. I mean, there are people, if you think about the biblical category of people who had leprosy or skin disease, they were always let back in. And there was always ritual around it because it was hard to be away. And the community there has to be some kind of ritual to say, you're part of us again. And I think there's something very profound about that. This is a whole book of Leviticus nobody likes to study in this in the liberal Jewish world, but I think in my retirement I'm going to do research on that, and anybody who wants to study Leviticus, I think there's just some tremendous profound truths that are not about skin disease. They're about community and what's it mean to be in and what's it mean to be out, and how do we figure out ways to really bring people back, to really let people back in who for whatever reason had to be out. All right, Rebecca writes, I wonder when we will reach a point that warrants a giant communal blessing of Gomel. Yeah, Gomel is a blessing that you say when you have gone through a dangerous experience. It's usually an individual thing that's said. Often people are say the Torah blessings, and then you bench Gomel, which is like, thank you, God, for getting me through this dangerous experience, and the congregation responds. So there's this like communal acknowledgement that I survived something very dangerous. It could be surgery, it could be it could be any number of things, and people to make their own decisions what it is. You know, will there be a moment of communal Gomel when the whole community can stand up and say it? Imagine it will be wrenching, emotional, collective experience shared by the community, also recognizing that everyone's experience at this time has been unique and different. Yeah, you know, Rebecca, I remember thinking about this at one point, like, how do we do a communal experience like that? And then I remember talking to different rabbis about the fact that some people have been going to synagogue all the way through. I know at our synagogue, we've had people who've sort of, you know, socially distanced, kept the minyan going. Other people have not been able to go. And it's an interesting question if people are coming back at different times and having different experiences. When does the community say, this is a communal experience that we have been through together and separately? That's a really interesting question. And I think High Levy was thinking it was going to be this high holidays, and it's not. So then when will it be, and what will it look like? These are questions that I think we have to just keep in the back of our minds. And, you know, I mean, your kids, I know, are at the day school, and, you know, what's that? They've been going to school. Other people's kids haven't been going to school. What is, you know, what does that all mean? Any other thoughts or comments in the chat box? I want to bring us one more text here, which was what Rabbi Laura said about, you know, we don't know. Right, feel free to drop things in. I know sometimes it takes a minute to type something in, and we'll come back to that, but I want to read the last text. All right, and this last text is from the Talmud. Talmud's written down around the year 600-ish. This is, the Mishnah is part 1 of the Talmud. Gemara is part 2 of the Talmud, and together they're called Talmud. This was sort of an oral tradition that eventually it was written down. This is the oral tradition that happened post-Bible. Like, what is the Bible? Trying to understand the Bible and trying to figure out, how do we live the words of the Bible? What does it mean to live these words? And especially after the year 70, what does it mean to live without the temple? Because remember, we had Judaism, the ancient Israelite world was the temple from the year 1000 BCE to the year 70 CE, more or less. I mean, we're talking 1,000 years, a tradition that developed around rituals at a temple. How do you keep this tradition going? And that's a lot of what this the Talmud is about. So, but there's so much more in the Talmud. It would be it's a sea of a CEA of literature. So this section asks, since Moses knew before the 10th plague, which was the death of the firstborn, Moses says to Pharaoh at around midnight, kechatzot, about midnight, this plague will happen. Well, why did he say about midnight? Why doesn't he just say at midnight? He knew what time it was going to happen. Why does he say around midnight? And he did so because he thought, well, maybe Pharaoh's astrologers will have a mistake in terms of the time. You know, not everybody's clock is the same, right? And maybe it'll become midnight on their clock and nothing will have happened. And they'll say, oh, Moses is a liar. Moses' God isn't a real God. And Moses was aware that it wasn't necessary to say at exactly this time, because, you know, people's clocks are different. So he said around this time. And he does this according to the principle articulated by the master. And this is the reason I brought this. This is a saying, Lamed lashoncha lomar, teach your tongue to say, Eini yodea, I don't know. Teach your tongue to say, I don't know. Or else you can become entangled in a web of deceit. So, boy, this is hard. I did a whole series earlier in the year on like living with uncertainty. I was going to pull some of those texts out. But I think this says it all. Teach your tongue to say, I don't know. And Silver Lace, we can stop sharing now. I think want to just be able to see everybody and maybe see if there's comments, thoughts at this point. You know, why is it so hard to say I don't know? It's like I used to joke about how if I was the kind of teacher who could get up and tell people what the answers were, I could get paid a lot more money and be the people who walk around with all the answers, they seem to be very popular. And I could never say that. I just don't, I don't know. That's the place I live in, or I try to live in, or I find that when I live in that space, I do a better job of being open to other people and other possibilities. But it's so much, we seek people who have answers, and we seek it within ourselves. And the true I deep in us, I think it takes a while to get there. Thoughts, comments, and Rabbi Laura, if there's anything you want to kind of bring on here at the end, I just want to invite you also.
I'm feeling the difference in my body when I have a hopeful I don't know versus a fearful I don't know. And that the biggest difference with those is that when I'm around other people who are willing and brave enough to say I don't know also, there's some hope there. I don't know if that feels paradoxical, but it's like, oh, okay, we're in this together not knowing, as opposed to me being alone, not knowing in a room full of people who know.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I think that's a beautiful way to enter into the holiday period for those of us who are observing the holidays. And if you're not observing the holidays, just to enter into life in general, right? It's surround yourself with other people who say, I don't know. It's like Jim, you wrote, humans seem to have a desire for certainty, right? So we look for that, but then maybe we ought to step back a little bit and look for people who don't have certainty. Kathy writes, Moses had a vision of a promised land and yet was willing to be uncertain. Yeah, we can have hope and uncertainty at the same time. Yes, and we do it together. I was trying to think of like, what is a metaphor for what we have gone through this last year and a half, where people are isolated and trying to come out of an isolation. And I think like, well, maybe it's leaving Egypt. But people weren't in their own little, rooms. It was a communal experience. And same thing with, leaving the desert and going into the land. By the way, none of those did we do so well. You just, so we shouldn't feel so badly. We didn't do so well in the desert. We became kind of difficult. We didn't do so well when we went into the land. We were difficult. It's just the nature of it. It's just the nature of it. But is this the kind of communities we can build? I mean, this is one of the reasons we had these classes over the last year and a half, and why, even though we couldn't do it in person, why these people were coming to these kinds of things in larger numbers than anybody could have even imagined would come. Because we want to know that we're not doing this by ourselves. Solomon, it seems the most vocal complainers are the ones who are dissatisfied with I don't know. Yeah, humans do take comfort in absolute certainty. Yeah, this is why cult leaders are so powerful. But I think this is the challenge that we face. We don't know, and we need to find ways to support our leaders when they say I don't know, and they need to make decisions, and we need to support those decisions, even though they don't know, they have to make some decisions. And then the really great leaders are willing to change their decisions. I know at JFS, we get changes all the time on what the policy is regarding masks, regarding coming back, not coming back, spaces and whatever. And I think I mentioned this last time, some people get very frustrated by that. How come we keep changing? Or schools, or how come they keep changing? Well, because they have to keep changing. That's just the way it is. They don't know, we don't know, and you have to make decisions. And Margaret, I'll take this as the last comment and I'll wrap up. I don't know, something good or better might happen. Yeah, that's true. Thank you, Judy. I'm not going to read that out loud, but thank you. I just skimmed it. And I want to thank all of you for the support you've given me over the last 6.5 years of this job, and really welcoming Rabbi Laura into this position. I think I feel very good handing this off to Rabbi Laura. I will be sending an evaluation, a letter to everybody at the end, in the next couple of days, just to say for kind of a final evaluation, and also other high holiday resources, JFS resources, volunteer opportunities. People have been asking us about what's happening with the refugees from Afghanistan. So I'll give you a little bit of an update on that in the follow-up email, which I'll send you in the next couple of days. But thank you. And just remember, it's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay. All right, have a good week. And for those of you who observe the holidays, the Jewish holidays, Hashanah Tova, a good, healthy, sweet New Year.